You already know this story, or you think you do. It is probably the single most famous image in all of philosophy, and it has been flattened over 24 centuries into a poster. Wake up, seek the light, do not be one of the sheep. And that version is not just thin, it is almost the opposite of what the man who wrote it meant. Because the real story, the one Plato actually told, is darker, stranger, and far more uncomfortable than the poster. It is not about them, it is about you, and it does not end well. So let us build it properly. Imagine people who have lived their whole lives, since childhood, chained inside a cave. Not just their hands, their heads, fixed, so they can only look one way, straight ahead, at a wall. They have never seen each other's faces. They have never seen their own bodies. They have never turned around. Forward, at the wall, is the only direction that has ever existed for them. Hold that. It matters more than it seems. Behind them, up a slope, a fire is burning, and between the fire and their backs there is a low wall, like the screen at a puppet show. And along that wall, out of sight, things are being carried, shapes, figures of people, of animals, of objects. The fire throws the shadows of those carried shapes onto the wall the prisoners face. So all day, across their entire lives, shadows move on the wall in front of them, and echoes of the carriers' voices bounce off the stone and seem to come from the shadows themselves. Now, here is the crucial move. Put yourself actually inside that. If that is all you had ever seen, the shadows would not be shadows to you. They would just be the world, the things themselves. What else could they be? You would give them names. You would get good at watching them. You would notice which shadow tends to follow which, and the one who predicted the sequence best would be the clever one, the wise one, the one the others admired. There would be an entire culture down there, skill, status, argument, all of it about shadows, and not one person in that cave would experience it as shadows. They would experience it as reality, as obvious, as just how things are. And that word, obvious, is the hinge of the whole thing, because their certainty is total, and it is completely wrong, and there is no experience available to them from the inside that could tell them the difference. Keep that discomfort close, because in about half an hour I am going to turn it on you. But first, one of them gets free. Before we free anyone, I want to stay in the cave a moment longer, because most tellings rush past it, and the shadows are the most important part. They are the part about you. Think about what the prisoners' whole lives consist of. Watching a flat, moving image on a wall and taking it for the entire world. Discussing it, reacting to it, forming beliefs about reality from a surface someone else is feeding them with a light source they cannot see, controlled by people they do not know are there. And notice who is missing from the prisoner's picture of the world. The carriers, the people behind the wall, choosing which shapes to lift, which to lower, what passes in front of the fire. The prisoners do not hate the carriers, do not resent them, do not argue with them, because they do not know they exist. The most powerful people in the cave, the ones actually shaping everything the prisoners see and believe, are perfectly invisible, not hidden by force, hidden by the angle of everyone's head. And here is what makes it a trap and not just a mistake. The prisoners are not stupid. Inside the cave, their beliefs are perfectly rational. Given the only evidence they have ever had, shadows, believing in shadows is the sane conclusion, the reasonable one. A prisoner who suddenly announced, "These are only shadows, there is a fire behind us and a real world above," would not sound enlightened to the others. he would sound insane. He would be contradicting everything everyone had ever observed. The cave does not feel like a prison. It feels like the truth. It feels exactly like your life feels to you right now. And one more thing about the shadows before we leave them. They are comfortable. This is the prisoner's home. Their whole community is here. Everyone they love, every shared reference, every joke, every bit of status they have earned exists in relation to the wall. So the shadows are not only what they believe, they are what they belong to. And that means leaving the shadows is not just changing your mind, it is losing your world. Which is exactly why, when the chance comes, it will not feel like freedom. It will feel like violence. And if some part of you is already thinking of a certain glowing rectangle, hold that thought. We will get there. Because the cave is not a museum piece. You may be sitting in one, but I promised you a prisoner would get free. So, let one of them be dragged loose. Here is where the poster and the text split apart completely. In the poster, the prisoner gently realizes there is more to life and walks toward the light with a smile. That is not what Plato wrote, not even close. Plato is precise and brutal. The prisoner is freed by force, compelled. Someone unchains him and makes him stand, makes him turn around, and the very first thing that happens is not wonder. It is pain. His eyes have known nothing but dimness his whole life, so the fire, the very source of a little more truth, sears him. It hurts. He is dazzled. He cannot make anything out, and his every instinct screams, turn back to the wall, to the shadows. Because the shadows do not hurt. The shadows are clear, and, this is the detail people miss, at this moment he is genuinely convinced the shadows are more real than the fire-lit objects he is now being shown. He is not being stubborn. From where he stands, the shadows really do look truer. Sit with how bad this feels, because Plato wants you to. Someone has grabbed you, spun you around, told you that everything you have ever known is a shadow on a wall, and offered you as proof a light that blinds you and objects you cannot yet see. Would you believe them? Of course you would not. You would think they were cruel or mad. You would fight to get back to the wall. The freed prisoner does not experience liberation as a gift. He experiences it as an assault on everything real. That is Plato's first hard truth. Waking up is not pleasant. It is an injury you resist, and it gets worse before it gets better, because now, still dazzled, still resisting, he is dragged further, not toward comfort, toward a steep, rough, rocky path, leading up and out of the cave entirely. Plato chooses those words deliberately: steep, rugged, painful. This is not a stroll to enlightenment. It is a forced march up a mountain by someone who does not want to go, away from the only home he has ever known, toward a light that so far has done nothing but hurt him. And I want to name why Plato made it so violent, because it is one of his deepest insights. He is telling you that truth is not a download. You cannot simply be shown reality and instantly upgrade. The mind has to be dragged, painfully, through stages it resists at every step. Because the old picture is not just information, it is home. And you do not leave home without grief. Anyone who has ever had a belief they built their life on turn out to be false knows this exact pain. It is not the pain of learning a fact, it is the pain of losing a world. So he is hauled, at last, out of the mouth of the cave, into the open air, into daylight. And you would think, this is the triumphant moment, the reveal, the reward. It is not. It is the worst moment yet. Because the sunlight, the real light of the real world, is so far beyond anything his eyes can handle that he is completely blind, not enlightened, blind. He can see less now than he could in the cave. He has traded a world he understood for a white, painful blur. And here Plato does something psychologically exact. He does not let the eyes adjust all at once. Recovery is slow, and it happens in a specific order. At first, he can only bear to look at shadows on the ground, outside. Notice that. The very first thing he can handle in the real world is the thing he already knew, shadows, the familiar at a slightly higher level. We always climb through the version of the new that most resembles the old. Then, reflections. He can look at things mirrored in water before he can look at the things themselves. Then, slowly, the objects, trees, stones, other people. Then he can lift his eyes to the sky, but only at night, the moon, the stars, softer lights. Each stage takes time. Each one is a small ordeal of adjustment, and every stage requires him to give up the comfort of the last. This is what real change looks like, not a flash of insight, but a long, ordered, effortful climb, rung by rung, each rung slightly painful. And finally, last of all, when his eyes are ready, he can look at the thing itself, the sun. Not its reflection, not its light on other things, the source, directly. And he understands in a rush that this one thing, is the cause of everything he has been looking at. That the sun makes the seasons, feeds the plants, gives the light by which everything is visible. That it is, in a sense, the source of it all. Remember that word, source. Because in a moment Plato tells us what the sun actually stands for, and it changes the whole allegory from a story about caves into a story about the highest thing a human mind can reach. So what is the sun? Plato is explicit, and this is where the allegory reveals its real ambition. The journey out of the cave, he says, is the journey of the mind, up out of the world of the senses, into the world of pure reality that only thought can reach. Plato believed the things we see and touch are not the real things. They are like the shadows, imperfect, changing, decaying copies, and behind them, graspable only by the mind, are the real things, the perfect, eternal, unchanging originals. He called them the forms. Take a circle. Every circle you have ever seen, drawn, printed, cut, is slightly imperfect, a little off. And yet you know, perfectly, what a true circle is. Where does that knowledge live? You have never seen one. Plato's answer, the perfect circle exists, not here, in the realm of forms. And your mind knows it because your mind can reach there. The drawn circles are shadows. The true circle is real. And he does not stop at circles. There is a form of beauty, a form of justice, a form of courage. Behind every imperfect just act, a perfect justice itself, that the act is a dim copy of. This is the world the freed prisoner has climbed into, not a nicer view, a different order of reality. And at the very top, the sun of that world is the highest form of all. The form of the good, the thing that gives all the other forms their reality and their value, the way the sun gives all things light and life. Plato says it is the last thing to be seen, and the hardest, and that once you have seen it, you understand it is the cause of everything right and beautiful. This is the summit. This is what the whole painful climb was for, to stand in the light of the good and finally see things as they actually are. And now, imagine being him, standing in the sun, everything clear, everything for the first time real. the shadows exposed as shadows, the whole cave revealed as the cramped, dark, second-hand thing it always was. He would be flooded with relief, and with something like pity for the people still chained below, still arguing about shadows, still calling it the world. He would never, never want to go back. And that is exactly when Plato does the cruelest and most important thing in the entire allegory. He sends him back. Why? Why would Plato drag his hero all the way up, through all that pain, to the light of the good itself, and then order him back down into the dark? It seems monstrous. And the reason is the key to what this allegory is really for. Because the cave, it turns out, was never really a story about one person's private enlightenment. It was always about the others, the ones still chained. And the freed prisoner, Plato says, has an obligation to them. He has to go back. This is Plato's answer to a temptation you may recognize. Once you have seen something clearly, once you have climbed out of some illusion, the easiest thing in the world is to stay out, to leave the others to their shadows, to enjoy your view, alone, and call the ones below hopeless. Plato refuses that. He says the one who has seen has a duty to descend, to go back into the discomfort, and try to free the others, even knowing how it will go. And here, the allegory stops being about knowledge and becomes about something harder: responsibility. What you owe the people still in the dark. But there is a terrible problem waiting for him on the way down. His eyes. They have adjusted to the sun. They are now built for daylight, and he is walking back into the dark. So when he re-enters the cave, he is blind again, but this time in the other direction. Coming in from the light, he cannot see the shadows at all. His eyes swim. He stumbles. The wall he once read so easily is now an unreadable murk, and the prisoners are watching him closely. And what they see decides everything. So picture the scene from the prisoner's side. One of their own vanished for a while. Now he is back. And he is worse. He fumbles. He cannot follow the shadows anymore. The game they are all expert at, he suddenly fails at. The man who used to be good at reading the wall now cannot do it at all. And he is babbling about what? A fire? A road up? A world above? A blazing light? While he cannot even name the shadow that just passed, the one any child in the cave could name. And so the prisoners draw the obvious conclusion, the only rational one from where they sit. Going up there, wherever he went, ruins you. He left able to see. He came back broken, blind, talking nonsense. The ascent is not enlightenment. It is damage. Look what it did to him. And they make a decision that seals the cave forever. They resolve that they will never go up, that anyone who offers to take them up is a danger, and the shadows, by comparison, have never looked so safe, so sensible, so true. And then Plato writes the sentence that turns the whole allegory from a lesson into a tragedy. He asks, what would they do to the man who keeps trying to drag them up into the light against their will? And his answer is chilling. If they could get their hands on him, he says, they would kill him. They would put to death the one who tried to free them. And every reader in Athens, the moment they heard that line, thought of one man. Because Plato's own teacher, Socrates, the wisest man he ever knew, the man who spent his life trying to drag his fellow citizens toward the light of harder questions, had been tried by that same city and sentenced to death and made to drink poison. The cave is not hypothetical. Plato watched it happen to the person he loved most. The freed prisoner who goes back to help gets killed for it. That is the story under the poster. So now, the turn. The one I warned you was coming. Because there is a way of watching this whole allegory that feels wonderful, and it is the way almost everyone watches it. And it is a trap. Here is the trap. As you listened, who were you? Be honest. You were the freed prisoner, weren't you? The one who sees, the one who climbed out. Surrounded, a little sadly, by all those poor chained people still staring at their walls, their phones, their news, their nonsense. Everyone casts themselves as the freed one, the awake one. That is the single most common response to this allegory, and Plato, I think, would find it darkly funny. Because think about what the prisoners believed. They believed, with total certainty, that they were seeing reality clearly, that the shadows were obviously real. Their confidence was absolute, and it was absolutely wrong. So let me ask you the only question that makes this allegory dangerous instead of flattering. What makes you so sure you are the one who got out, and not one of the ones still on the wall, feeling exactly as certain as they feel? What would it even feel like, from the inside, to be in a cave you could not see the walls of? It would feel like this, like reality, like the obvious, like you having got it basically right while other people are fooled. The feeling of being awake is not evidence that you are. It is exactly what the prisoners felt. There is no internal sensation of being enlightened that the deceived do not also have. And that is the real gift of the allegory, and it is not a comfortable one. It is not, congratulations, you escaped. It is the removal of your right to be sure that you did. It hands you a permanent uncertainty about your own clarity. So here is the line to carry out of here. The confidence that you are the one who escaped is precisely the feeling every prisoner has staring at the wall. The cave gives you no way to tell from the inside, and if that lands, it should do something specific to you. It should not make you despair. It should make you curious and a little suspicious about the things you are most certain of, the beliefs that feel too obvious to question, because those, the obvious ones, the ones you cannot imagine being wrong about, are the shadows most likely to be shadows. Nobody examines what everybody knows. That is what makes it a wall. So let us make it concrete. Because you have been waiting for me to say it, and it is too easy and too true to skip. We have built the most literal cave in human history, and most of us sit in it for hours a day. A rectangle, glowing, held at arm's length, filling your vision, feeding you a flat, moving image of a world that you increasingly take for the world itself. Shadows on a wall, lit by a source you do not see, arranged by people you do not know are there, and the parallel is almost uncomfortably exact. Remember the carriers, the hidden people behind the wall who chose which shapes to cast. You have those now, except they are not people carrying statues. They are systems deciding which shadows reach you, what you see, in what order. Tuned, not for truth, but to keep your head fixed forward, at the wall. And like the prisoners, you mostly do not experience it as a curated feed of shadows. You experience it as the world, what is happening, what people think, what is true, and the ones arranging it stay exactly where the carriers were, out of frame, behind you, invisible by the angle of your attention. But, and this is where our cave is even stranger than Plato's, we do not all share one wall anymore. Each of us has our own, tuned to us. So each person is in a slightly different cave, watching slightly different shadows, and absolutely certain that theirs is the real one. Which is why two people can look at the same event and see genuinely different realities, and each think the other is insane, or lying, or a prisoner. Both of them, pointing at the other, saying, "Look at the fool, still watching shadows," neither able to feel their own wall. That is not a bug in the modern world. That is the cave, multiplied. Now, I have to be careful here, because it would be easy to turn this into screens bad, put down your phone, touch grass. That is the poster version again. Too simple. The point is not that screens are evil. The point is the structure. Any source that feeds you a version of reality while keeping its own workings out of view and rewards you for not turning your head is a cave wall. It might be a feed. It might be an ideology. It might be the consensus of everyone you know. The question is never just, is this comfortable and obvious? The question is, what is behind me that I have never turned to look at? And now we have to talk about the part of this allegory that almost every feel-good telling quietly deletes. Because the cave is not a standalone story. Plato buried it in the middle of a much bigger book, a book about power, about who should rule. The book is called The Republic, and its central question is not, what is real? It is, who should be in charge of the city? And the allegory of the cave is Plato's argument for his answer. Here is the argument. If most people are prisoners, mistaking shadows for reality, then most people are, by definition, not fit to decide anything important. They are wrong about the most basic nature of things. Why would you let them steer the city? And who should steer it instead? The one who climbed out, the one who saw the sun, the good, reality as it truly is, the philosopher. Plato's conclusion is blunt. The person who has escaped the cave should rule, and everyone still inside should be ruled by him. He called this figure the philosopher-king, and notice how neatly the whole allegory now clicks into place as a political machine. The forced return? That is the philosopher's duty to come back and govern. Plato even says the philosopher will not want to rule. He would rather stay in the sun, and must be compelled to, which sounds almost noble. The reluctant, wise ruler, dragged from contemplation to serve the people who do not even understand what he is doing for them. That is the flattering shape of it, and it is genuinely part of what Plato meant. But sit with the structure for one more second, because it has a second face, and that face is much darker. Here is the dark face of the structure. If the world divides cleanly into the enlightened few, who have seen the truth, and the blind many, who have not, then a very dangerous door swings open, because someone now gets to decide who is which. Someone gets to say, I have seen the sun, you have not. Therefore I may drag you up the path, by force, for your own good, whether you consent or not. Remember, in Plato's own story, the ascent is compulsory. The prisoner is freed against his will, and if you know any 20th century history, a bell should be ringing, loudly, because that exact structure, a small group who have supposedly seen the true shape of history, or society, or the people's real interest, entitled to compel everyone else toward it for their own good by any means, is the skeleton of almost every totalitarian regime that has ever existed. The vanguard who knows, the masses who must be led, re-educated, corrected, dragged up the path whether they like it or not. Every one of them casts itself as the freed prisoner, kindly returning to save the fools. It is the cave, weaponized. And one philosopher saw this so clearly that he wrote a 2-volume attack during the Second World War as, in his words, his own war effort. His name was Karl Popper. The book, The Open Society and Its Enemies. And in it, he put Plato first. Not as the founder of enlightened wisdom, the usual portrait, but as the first great enemy of the open society. Popper argued that the Republic, with its rigid ranks, its censorship, its philosopher-king with unquestioned authority, was an early blueprint for the closed, authoritarian state. That the beautiful allegory of the cave carried, folded inside it, a justification for domination. And this is the tension you have to hold, because it does not resolve. The very same allegory is both. It is one of the most profound accounts ever written of how we mistake appearance for reality and how hard the climb to truth is. And it is a template that, in the wrong hands, licenses the enlightened to rule the blind by force. It is a masterpiece of humility about knowledge, wrapped around a claim of enormous political certainty. Both are really in there. Anyone who gives you only one is handing you a shadow. But now I have to protect you from the opposite mistake, because it is just as dangerous, and it is the easy exit from everything I have just said. If nobody can be sure they are out of the cave, if my certainty is no better than anyone's, then maybe there is no truth at all. Maybe every wall is as good as every other. Maybe it is all just shadows, all the way down, and I should stop trying. That feels like the humble conclusion. It is actually a betrayal of the whole thing, because look at what Plato actually claims. He does not say there is no reality. He says the exact opposite. There is a sun. There is a real world above the cave. The shadows are not all equally true. Some things are genuinely closer to reality than others. His point was never, nothing is real, so give up. It was, reality is real and hard to reach, so the work matters. The difficulty of the climb is not an argument against climbing. It is the reason the climb is worth respecting. Confusing, I cannot be certain, with, therefore nothing is true, is how you talk yourself back into the chains and call it wisdom. So the humility the cave teaches is a very particular kind. It is not, nothing can be known. It is, knowing is hard, and I might be wrong, so I must keep checking, keep climbing, keep turning around. That is the opposite of giving up. It is what taking truth seriously actually feels like. The lazy relativist and the smug enlightened man make the same error from opposite ends. One says, I have arrived, I am certain. The other says, no one can arrive, so why move? And both, conveniently, get to stop climbing. Plato asks the harder thing. Keep going, precisely because you are not sure. And in fairness, real fairness, I have to turn the same suspicion on Popper, because his reading of Plato is itself contested. Sharply. Many scholars argued Popper read Plato through the lens of his own war, that he used unfair translations, that he missed the irony in the dialogues, that he flattened a subtle thinker into a cartoon villain. So even the man warning us about certainty was, some say, too certain. Which is not a reason to dismiss him. It is the whole lesson applied one more level up. There is no reading of the cave you get to hold without turning it over. Not even the critical one. Not even mine. So what do you actually walk out with? Not a conclusion. The cave does not give you one. It gives you a better question and takes a worse one away. The worse question, the flattering one, is the one almost everyone leaves with. Have I escaped the cave? Am I one of the awake ones? And you have seen now why that question is a trap. Everyone answers it yes. The prisoners answered it yes. It tells you nothing. It only feels good. The better question, the one Plato actually leaves in your hands, is harder, and you never get to finish answering it. It is two parts. First, what am I most certain is real? that might be a shadow. What belief is so obvious to me that I have never once turned around to check it? And second, the one the carriers do not want you to ask. Who benefits from me staring at this particular wall? Who is served by my attention pointing exactly here and never turning around? Those two questions, asked honestly, are the closest thing to freedom the cave allows. Because here is the last hard truth. You do not get to escape the cave once and be done. That is the poster's lie, the sunlit ending. There is no arriving. There is no day you wake up permanently enlightened and stay there. There is only the turning, again and again, catching one shadow and turning to find the fire behind it, then realizing the fire is in another cave and turning again. It is not an event, it is a practice, a direction you keep choosing, knowing you will never see the final sun and stay in it. And the strange thing is, that is not a bleak way to live. It is a spacious one. Because the person who knows they might be in a cave is gentler with the people they disagree with, slower to call the other side blind, quicker to suspect their own certainty, more curious, less captured. They hold their strongest beliefs a little more loosely, not because nothing is true, but because they know how it feels to be wrong and certain at the same time. It feels exactly like being right. And that one piece of humility changes how you treat everyone still staring at a wall, including the one in the mirror. 24 centuries ago, a man watched his teacher put to death by a city that preferred its shadows, and he wrote a story to explain why. Not to flatter us that we are the wise ones, to warn us that we are almost certainly not, and that the walls we trust most are the ones we have never thought to turn away from. So do not ask whether you got out. Ask what you are staring at. Ask who set it there. And then, gently and often, and never finally, turn your head. The chains were never really on your hands. Plato was very clear about that. They were on your head, holding it in one direction. And turning it is the one thing in the whole cave that was always yours to do. See what people hide, even from themselves.